The job was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to reinvent myself. It wasn't. The city felt cold, impersonal. Grey buildings against a grey sky, just like my tiny apartment. The work, mind-numbing. Data entry, endless rows of numbers on a screen. My apartment was miles away, out in the suburbs. A cheap place, all I could afford. I didn't know the roads, didn't even have the energy to learn. Every day, the same drive, same feeling of being adrift, lost in a sea of anonymous faces. Tonight I took a wrong turn. Distracted, tired. The GPS was useless, battery dead. I swore under my breath. This was turning into a nightmare. I found myself on a narrow lane. Trees crowding in on either side, streetlights few and far between. The houses were dark, most of them looked empty, deserted. Up ahead, a flicker of light, orange against the darkening sky. At first I thought it was the setting sun, then I smelled it, smoke, thick and acrid. My heart pounded in my chest. I pressed down on the gas pedal. Something was wrong, very wrong. The house was engulfed. Flames shooting into the night. A wall of fire. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop. Heat washed over me, even from this distance. There was a woman standing on the lawn, hysterical, screaming. Her voice was high-pitched, desperate. "My husband, he's still inside! Please help him!" She was frantic, clutching at my arm. I didn't even think, didn't hesitate. Adrenaline surged through me. I ran towards the inferno. The heat was intense. I could feel it scorching my skin. The front door was open. Flames licked at the doorframe. Smoke billowed out, thick and black. I coughed, waving my hand in front of my face. I could hear the roar of the fire, the crackling of timbers. There was no time to think, no time to be afraid. I took a deep breath and plunged into the inferno. The heat hit me like a physical blow. I could barely see. The air was thick with smoke. I dropped to my knees, crawling forward, coughing, gasping for air, calling out, "Hello, is anyone there?" The house was a maze, smoke stinging my eyes, blinding me. I bumped into furniture, my hands feeling for any sign of life. The roar of the fire seemed to be everywhere. The floor was hot beneath my hands. I knew I wouldn't last long in this inferno. Then I heard it, a cough, weak but definitely human. I crawled towards the sound. The heat was unbearable. My throat felt raw, but I pushed on. Adrenaline kept me going. I found him slumped against a wall. His eyes were closed. He wasn't moving. I dragged him out of the house. The heat was unbearable, and the smoke stung my eyes, making it hard to see. I could feel the flames licking at my back, urging me to move faster. The weight of the man I was rescuing seemed to double with every step I took, half carrying, half dragging his dead weight. My lungs burned with every breath I took, each inhale feeling like I was swallowing fire. The acrid smoke filled my nostrils, making me cough uncontrollably. I could barely keep my balance, stumbling over debris as I made my way out. Every muscle screamed in protest. My arms felt like they were made of lead and my legs threatened to give out beneath me. The pain was excruciating, but I couldn't stop. I had to get him to safety. The thought of leaving him behind was unbearable. We collapsed onto the lawn, gasping for air. The cool grass felt like a blessing against my skin, a stark contrast to the inferno we had just escaped. I could hear the crackling of the fire behind us, but for a moment all I could focus on was the sweet relief of fresh air filling my lungs. The woman, the one who'd been screaming, rushed over to us. Her face was a mask of terror and desperation. She had been waiting, hoping against hope that we would make it out alive. Her eyes were wide with fear, darting between the man I had saved and the burning house, but she didn't thank me, not even a glance. Her focus was entirely on the man I had pulled from the flames. It was as if I didn't exist. I watched as she knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she checked for signs of life. She just knelt beside the man, cradling his head in her lap. Her tears fell onto his soot-streaked face and she whispered words of comfort, hoping to bring him back to consciousness. Her love for him was palpable, and I felt a pang of envy, wishing someone would look at me that way. The fire trucks arrived with a deafening roar. Their sirens pierced the night, a sound that was both a promise of help and a reminder of the danger we had just escaped. The flashing lights illuminated the scene, casting eerie shadows on the burning house. Flashing lights cut through the smoke, creating a surreal, almost otherworldly atmosphere. The red and blue beams danced through the haze, making the scene look like something out of a nightmare. It was a stark reminder of the chaos and destruction that fire can bring. Firefighters, their faces grim beneath their helmets, rushed past me into the heart of the blaze. They moved with purpose and determination, their training evident in every step. I watched them go, feeling a mix of admiration and helplessness. They were the real heroes, risking their lives to save others. One of them checked on the man, then looked at me. His eyes were cold, accusing. It was as if he blamed me for the situation, for the danger we had all been in. I wanted to explain, to tell him that I had no choice, but the words wouldn't come. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he said. His voice was stern, leaving no room for argument. He was right, of course. I had acted on impulse, driven by a need to save a life, but in doing so, I'd put my own life at risk. You could have been killed. The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew he was right, but I couldn't regret my actions. I had saved a life, and that was worth the risk. Still, his warning lingered in my mind, a reminder of the fine line between heroism and recklessness. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked away, leaving me speechless. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. I had done what I thought was right, but in the eyes of the professionals, I had only made things worse. The cold shoulder I received was a harsh reminder of the consequences of my actions. Paramedics arrived, sirens wailing. They loaded the man onto a stretcher. I watched as they wheeled him towards the ambulance. The woman went with them, never once acknowledging my presence. The feeling of elation, of having done something heroic, quickly evaporated. In its place, a hollow ache. Then the man, the one I'd pulled from the flames, looked at me. His eyes met mine. They were cold, empty, devoid of gratitude. "You shouldn't have interfered," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "We didn't ask for your help." Then he turned away, his words hanging in the air like a curse. The fire was out, reduced to smouldering rubble. The once vibrant home, now a mere skeleton of its former self, lay in ruins. The flames had devoured everything, leaving behind only charred remnants and memories. The smell of smoke lingered, acrid and bitter. It clung to the air, a constant reminder of the devastation that had unfolded. Every breath I took was filled with the scent of loss and destruction. I stood there for a long time, watching the firefighters pack up their gear, feeling lost and alone. Their faces were weary, their movements slow, as if the weight of the night had taken its toll on them too. The cold night air chilled me to the bone. It was a stark contrast to the heat of the fire, a cruel reminder of the emptiness that now surrounded me. I shivered, not just from the cold, but from the overwhelming sense of desolation. My clothes were torn, my skin covered in soot. Each tear and stain told a story of the chaos and panic that had ensued. I felt like a part of the wreckage, broken and scarred. I felt like a ghost, invisible. The world moved on around me, but I was stuck in that moment, unable to move forward. The emptiness of the street mirrored the emptiness inside me. I turned to leave, my throat tight with unshed tears. Each step felt heavy, as if the weight of the night was pulling me back. I wanted to cry, to scream, but no sound came out. That's when I noticed them. A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to look. Two figures standing across the street, watching me. They were still, almost too still, as if they were waiting for something, or someone. They were shrouded in shadow, their faces obscured. I couldn't make out their features, but I could feel their gaze. It was intense, almost piercing, but I could feel their eyes on me. Cold, calculating, menacing. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized I wasn't alone in my grief. Someone or something was watching, and they weren't here to help. I started walking towards my car, towards the main road, away from the burnt-out shell of the house, now just a memory, away from the accusing eyes of the strangers. My heart pounded in my chest, echoing my fear. I could feel their gaze on my back, burning into me. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the acrid smell of smoke and something else. Something I couldn't quite place, a sense of unease, of being watched, of being followed. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, a primal reaction. I didn't look back, kept walking. The night was thick with shadows, each one seeming to stretch and reach out as if trying to pull me back. The air was cold, biting at my skin, but I couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not when I was so close. My car was a beacon in the darkness, a promise of escape. It stood there, alone in the empty parking lot, its headlights cutting through the night like a lighthouse guiding a lost ship. I quickened my pace, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the stillness. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking. Each second felt like an eternity as I struggled to fit the key into the lock. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, and I could feel the sweat trickling down my back. The fear was palpable, almost suffocating. The engine roared to life, a comforting sound in the stillness of the night. The dashboard lights flickered on, casting a soft glow inside the car. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to give me a momentary sense of safety. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The figures were gone, or at least they seemed to be. The street behind me was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that they were still out there, hidden in the shadows, but the feeling of unease remained. It clung to me like a second skin, making it hard to breathe. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a reminder that I was still alive, still in danger. A cold knot in the pit of my stomach. It twisted and turned, a constant reminder of the fear that gripped me. I tried to calm myself, to take deep breaths, but it was no use. The fear was too strong, too overwhelming. I knew with chilling certainty that I hadn't seen the last of them. They were out there somewhere in the darkness, watching, waiting. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I couldn't help but glance around, searching for any sign of movement. They were out there, somewhere in the darkness, watching, waiting. I could feel their eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. It was as if the night itself was alive, filled with unseen dangers lurking just out of sight. And I had a terrible feeling that they knew something I didn't, something dark and dangerous. It was a gnawing sensation, a whisper in the back of my mind that refused to be silenced. What did they want? Why were they after me? Something linked to the fire. The memory of the flames danced in my mind, a haunting reminder of the night everything changed. The fire had been no accident, and I was certain it was connected to the figures that now haunted my every step. Linked to the man I had saved, linked to me. The man had whispered something to me before he died, something I couldn't quite remember. But I knew it was important. I knew it held the key to understanding why I was being hunted, and I knew I had to find out before it was too late.